Everyone understands that students have phones in their hands all the time. They're glued to their mobile devices. Students want a human when they want a human, but they want 24/7 access. I think students are interested and intrigued of the use of something like AI when it comes to customer service for them.
And how have you dealt with that?
Some of it is...
Today, we're going to be talking to Chris Pilsner. Chris is Executive Director of Relationship Management and Digital Experience at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. And our conversation with Chris is really going to give us a nice view into higher education. We're going to talk about the importance of de-siloing, of really taking those silos down and making sure that everyone in the team is able to work together toward a common goal. We're going to talk about finding those evangelists within the organization, those people who can really sponsor and move initiatives forward so that progress is being made. And we're going to talk about the importance of prototypes, of giving teams something they can visually see, something tangible they can use and rally around to really understand how their part plays a role in getting things accomplished. We're happy to be talking to Chris today. Let's get started. Chris, thank you for being on the podcast today. We're very happy to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Well, we're looking forward to talking to someone in higher education. This is an industry that we haven't yet had a chance to really explore on the pod, and it brings its own challenges, its own opportunities, apart from different industries. And yet, at the same time, there are things that are just industry agnostic, right? Just things that happen no matter where you're working in any large organization, problems and challenges you face. And I know in talking to you earlier, one of those kind of challenges that you face is making sure people don't work in silos. Whether it's in higher ed, I know you have a background in Madison Avenue, across any industry, people just tend to work in silos. And as a leader, you have to learn how to navigate those silos, how to get people communicating, working together, sharing the vision, sharing the objective, working toward the same goal. How have you found effective ways to do that in your time here at UMass?
So when it comes to getting people out of their silos or uniting big cross-functional teams, you just said it a bit in the question, keeping people united around a goal. What is your goal? Are you clear about that? Does everybody understand that? Strategy is incredibly important no matter what you're trying to do. And making sure that everybody has those clear goals in mind and has the resources that they need to succeed. So pretty much, fundamental management principle. For in higher education and anywhere, I think certainly that marketing research, what are those insights? For us, it's obviously our with the big initiatives we're working on today has to do with our core constituents of students. So, what drives them, what's relevant, what problems they trying to overcome, is everybody clear about that? And certainly when it comes to breaking down silos and uniting folks, you really need to have a lot of conversations. So we, for this major initiative we're working on now around CRM, we've had so many conversations, and it's really exciting to hear the enthusiasm from different stakeholders when it comes to how much they want to break down silos. So that certainly, reaffirms that we're on the right track and we're engaging the right people. And then, of course, lastly, you can't forget data. So, when it comes to de-siloing, I think regardless of the function, everybody acknowledges that we all need to share the appropriate data. So making sure that's certainly probably our most valuable asset.
It's interesting. You touched on the fact that you have this large kind of CRM initiative taking place across the university. And whenever you're dealing with the digital experience, that brings its own challenges in and of itself. So you've had these general challenges that just come with trying to do business on a day-to-day basis. But then when you deal with digital, those challenges get a little bit more complicated because you require this critical alignment between these different groups, between what marketing and communications is doing, what IT is doing, what the academic departments are doing across the organization. And those things really need to be in lockstep in order to deliver the proper digital experience. Is that a challenge you faced, and how have you dealt with that?
I think, well, certainly in marketing in general, the rise of MarTech, you could be an expert in marketing strategy, but in terms of the cost investment, time investment, so many people need to touch a technology. There's always, I think, a bit of a challenge of how deep do you need to go in any particular platform or technology. It almost becomes like do you have an expert in web content, or do you have somebody who really knows Drupal? You probably need both, but finding that balance is important. when you zoom the lens out, go beyond just marketing communications, certainly digital creates its own challenges, because when your leadership in a universities tends to be many academics, they're not necessarily practitioners. This is oftentimes new space to them. It's not that they don't get the principles, not that they don't understand this and realize the challenges, but they're not as familiar with the jargon. So you need to be very careful that you are choosing your words appropriately, and even some of those core principles of communications or marketing, like repetition, like you need to have frequency when it comes to things with marketing. Things that you would take for granted when talking to a marketing colleague, you do need to kind of take a step back. And then certainly, even just between IT and marketing, when you're in that kind of more practitioner space, you really do need to kind of walk it back and learn how to work with those trusted colleagues who you have worked with a while, make sure that you have that trust, because it does take a lot of trial and error and just practice. Again, we presented our vision for our major initiative to over 60 different groups, and that certainly provided us with a sense of what concepts were playing well, what language was really landing appropriately. So, not only are we orienting everything to our students, and that's our primary audience, but you almost need to think about your internal constituents as an audience. And then I think lastly, in higher education in particular, strategy is important, but that tends to be more conceptual and words on a paper. When you using specific examples, I think it's really important, even when you're dealing with savvier audiences or practitioner audiences, because if I say student portal, something different may pop up in one person's mind than another. So we really started and have leaned heavily into non-working prototypes whenever possible. So people had something tangible to react to, and that really starts conversation going. And that gave us a great jumping off point for student research, because again, going back to those insights, that helps us stay close to, why are we doing this project in the first place? It's really about the students. We're trying to solve this problem. So you kind of need to go up and down the strategy ladder and going into specifics.
You created a picture in my mind because you were talking about making sure you're using the right language. And sometimes the challenge is it's as if you're speaking two different languages. You have someone maybe from marketing communications and they're speaking to someone from maybe the IT team. And it's like, okay, you're speaking French and you're speaking Chinese, and like we are not understanding each other. So I really like the point that you made about having something tangible, having an example. You think about two people who speak a different language. How do they communicate? Well, often it's with visual cues, right? You point to what you're talking about. And then it's like, oh, okay, I know what that is. Like I interpret that my own way, but I know what that is now that you're pointing into it, right? So essentially that's what you do, right? You're presenting, you're trying to get these teams in alignment. And it's like, let me show you exactly what I'm talking about. IT sees that through their lens of, okay, what are the technical requirements I need to be able to execute on that? Whereas marketing sees it through their lens and says, okay, what am I trying to communicate? What's the user experience I want? So that makes complete sense to me, how you articulated that. And it makes me think of another question. So you're trying to get these different groups to align. And I'm thinking of something very specific. So for example, let's talk about personalization, right? So you're trying to get groups to align. You're trying to deliver a very personalized experience. But maybe the legal group is thinking about this from the lens of compliance and thinking about this from the lens of privacy when they see you want to do something like that. So in a situation like that, how do you balance out their needs to say, hey, I'm looking at this and I'm seeing, the issues that we have to deal with from a compliance standpoint when it comes to education, as opposed to maybe, again, the marketing team or the digital experience team, your team, saying, well, we need to deliver this personalized experience because the generation that we're talking to, that's the kind of experience they're expecting. How do you find that balance to be?
I think certainly in higher ed, we are, this is an ongoing discussion. In some ways, the boundaries are fairly clear because we have FERPA, they're very clear guidelines. But I think when it comes to personalization, we are still probably behind some of industry practices when it comes to personalization. I think we're trying to connect different silos into a united student experience. So we don't want students to have to repeat themselves multiple times that they're trying to get a problem solved and they're talking to a different office to have a problem solved. So, I'm thinking more specifically about things like case management and being able to okay, I know who you are. I hear you. I see you. Certainly this is fraught because there is critically important data that does need to be protected, like financial aid data. But I think at this point, it's going to be a fairly careful and painstaking process when it comes to getting different offices to work together, working on roles and permissions. So much of this is, I think we're starting with the business process and really making sure that there's a solid foundation. The kind of personalization that I really hope to have eventually is much more around responding to student behavior. Have they or have they not taken action on a critical step? So these conversations are ongoing as we refine our data strategy, but we're still, our personalization is really making sure that we understand who those students are, that their student experience can be as consistent as possible across different offices.
In dealing with students and thinking about something as an example of personalization, understanding the kind of experiences that the students expect, given the generation they're in, the age they're at, the way things were when we grew up and our expectations versus their expectations now when they come to university are markedly different, especially from a digital touch point. I know you've done some research around that and really trying to understand, okay, what is the student expectation now? What kind of experience are they expecting from this institution of higher learning? Has you done that? Is that really having a major impact, not just on you and what you're doing, but as you begin to communicate that out to the rest of the organization in terms of helping them to align and understand what you need to do as an institution?
There are when it comes to understanding what students are looking for in their experience, some of it is, I think, obvious, and everyone understands that students have phones in their hands all the time. They're glued to their mobile devices, mobile first. We are overusers and over-index with email today, but we do need to move more to SMS or push notifications. But so some of those things are simple and easy, I think, for everyone to align on. How to get there, I think, is a different story. But I think when it comes to the student experience they've come to expect in the bit of research that we've done so far, students want a human when they want a human, but they want 24/7 access. They have come accustomed to putting in a long tail search term. We don't always have the most searchable content out there. So I think those are some of the more nuanced conversations that we're starting to engage with. Certainly AI and chatbots is, that's the really sexy thing that's on everyone's minds, but I think we're still a ways away from there. I think students are interested and intrigued, and so far I think are fairly forgiving and understanding of the use of something like AI when it comes to customer service for them.
One of the things we talk about a lot on the pod is around this experience gap, right? So people have this expectation, certainly students have this expectation, and it's being driven by leaders in the marketplace, by the Amazons of the world. And then you've got reality as to where you are as an organization. And it's like, well, how do we get from here to there? And oftentimes people in the organization and even your constituents, the students, don't understand that the 50 things that need to happen to get from here to there and how complicated and how big of a road that is and the amount of change that needs to happen to do that. And as you well know, higher education is not known to be this fast moving, nimble industry in terms of being able to navigate those kinds of changes. So how much of your job is change management, is helping to navigate change on an institutional level to be able to get to where you need to go?
Change management is probably 100% of what we do. No, but it is a large part of what we do. So much of that has to do with really, I think about it as like top down, bottom up. My team does an excellent job of reaching out and getting to know the folks who are on the ground and what are those real challenges. And at the same time, we are elevating these needs with senior leadership so that it's clear that this change is endorsed by and is helping to it certainly is coming from the top. A big part of that is central funding. When we're talking about adoption of new technologies in CRM, it really helps to not only have to enact change, but then not have to put your hand out for that as well. Because our strategy from the beginning, when we embarked on this years ago, was really, piloting, which is certainly an effective way to do this. If you are doing change management, I always think it's a great idea to find those evangelists and find those early adopters and hold them up as an example, create those case studies. But then as you grow your footprint, you really do need that senior level endorsement. And then I think lastly, it's really data. So, uniting all of our communicators in a single email platform was definitely a heavy lift, but we're incredibly proud of it. But it was hard work. So I think now being able to showcase data that reflects the insights of how people are engaging with the university, that helps people see like, okay, this is worth it. When we deprecated dozens of small email platforms.
Again, you're thinking about that list of 50 things that need to happen, and it's just kind of taking those one step at a time, right? And just managing all the different groups that kind of touch that, right? Getting them to a place where they kind of see, okay, it was worth it to accomplish number 2. I'm ready to go to number 3 because I see the benefits of doing 2, and then kind of taking that one step at a time. Now, of course, in your role, right, you have to align that, what you're trying to manage internally, with this journey that your students are on as they begin to engage with you, all the way from thinking about what they feel about UMass to saying, okay, I want to apply, to actually, hopefully coming and how they get started, taking their classes and so forth. So now you've got this journey that they're on, and they've got their touch points. And now it sounds like, are beginning to get this data that's helping you see kind of where the friction is in these different touch points. How do you kind of begin now to prioritize and say, okay, I see this friction here at 6 different places. Which one comes first? Which one comes second? How do you think about that, to think through those kinds of challenges?
Student retention is a big focus for us. We have very strong retention numbers, but we want to lift that even higher. Clearly, it is a very complex set of factors that contribute to students' persistence and thriving. Really, we don't want to just make it. So there are very clear opportunities that we're starting to identify that ensure that we're supporting students properly. Students are inundated. We're just going to focus on the communications aspect for one thing, is that students are inundated by so much email. It's certainly a medium that we've overused, and we have a decentralized environment. So, but this is not a unique problem to higher ed. It's an email problem. Like, everything lands in your inbox at the same level of priority. So as we're, signaling to students, you better pay that parking ticket because you won't be able to register tomorrow. It's right next to an email. It's like, come to an ice cream social for the Glee Club. Both of these things, that human connection and the extracurricular aspect, that's a huge part of student success. It's what makes these experiences rich and helps people become better humans. But, you need to make sure that you can register for classes. That's absolutely core and central. So, we're forcing students to work so hard, and really their executive functioning is taxed when, they're trying to filter through and sort through so much email. And, that energy that's taken from just trying to filter through what we're sending them, that takes them away from what they really need to do, which is learn and evolve as a human being. So we're really, auditing that communications landscape, trying to figure out what can we do to clean that space up. This is many, many legacy systems and work practices. So that it's a big, big task. We're trying to bucket out, like, is this something that's a critical intervention? That's a message that must go to a student, versus this is a really fun opportunity. And then from here, it's really going to be about governance and setting standards. So, students are telling us, and many of them are working really, really hard to succeed. They want to succeed. I think we're hearing from students that, this is a big challenge, especially in a post-COVID, highly digital world. They want to succeed. They're working really hard to do that. And they want to signal that to us. But again, it looks like we're making them work harder. So, like, how can we fix those work processes, set higher standards, have better governance, and make sure that everyone's aligned internally?
What you mentioned makes me think about something that I would imagine must be a challenge for you. And I'd love to hear kind of how you kind of navigate this, just even on a personal level. Obviously, you're very passionate. I've known you now for a few years. You're very passionate about the student and their experience. And as you just mentioned, them having the kind of learning and education that they want to attain so that they can succeed and do what they want to accomplish. But you and I both know when you're in any organization, whether it's higher education or in a corporate world, keeping your eyes on that becomes very hard. It's very easy to get bogged down in the day-to-day minutia of things, in just putting out fires and dealing with issues and fixes and so forth, and kind of to get that haze that just causes you to lose sight of the students and what is this really about, and that we need to prioritize that. How do you find, just as you go through your day-to-day, that you keep that focus and say, okay, Chris, this is about the kids. This is about how we're helping them to succeed, how we're helping them to grow. Let me level set. Make sure that I'm kind of buckling down and making sure that's the lens and focus I'm maintaining on kind of a day-to-day basis.
It's not that hard, mostly because I work with such great people this is why they're here, is why they get up at bed every day. We have a wonderful cross-functional steering committee. So I'm working closely with folks who are, in the provost office, who are focused on student success and student affairs and campus life. So they are day-to-day, on the front lines with students, even if I'm not. So that is easy to keep that focus because we're constantly talking, because we have this cross-functional group. It's again about de-siloing. So we are in the steering committee at the top, we are de-siloed. I think, as far as not losing focus, not losing sight, I think for me personally, it's always been really valuable to get out of the office. And even though it feels like there's always a crushing workload, go to that conference, see what's happening, talk to other institutions. The beauty of higher ed is that the word collegial, is there for a reason. I found colleagues at other institutions are always really, open and generous about talking about what's worked. And that provides often a really helpful tool in sharing with senior leadership how we could be working harder, how we could be better competitively positioned as well. And then also, I think hiring good partners too, is also really valuable, because especially if you're adopting new technologies, we've not done this before. You want to find somebody who's an expert. And sometimes when you're doing all this change management, you're doing all this adoption, you could say the same thing until you're red in the face, but it lands better when it's coming from an expert who's outside of the institution. So
it is so much about the people that you're working with, right? It's the team and their mentality. It makes me think, I don't know if you ever read Jim Collins, but he has a few books, but one of the things that really stood out to me that Jim Collins always said is, it's first who, then what, right? It's who you put in these key seats on this bus that you're driving forward. And if you have the right people on there, then the what will kind of come next, and you'll be able to accomplish that. So to hear that you guys at UMass have a team of people who are really committed to saying, hey, we really care about the student. We want the student to have experience. I can only imagine how much easier that makes your job, because you don't get as lost in the weeds of it, right? Because everyone's kind of on the same page of saying, hey, we're all going to kind of rally together and we're going to figure out how we can deliver the best student experience possible. And to hear that things are so collaborative just in the education space in general, right? That you can talk to your colleagues and you can kind of share ideas. Again, because everyone cares about the student and just deliver a really good experience. So that's really encouraging to hear. So I guess that being the case then, as you think about talking to your colleagues, if they were listening here, maybe they're at maybe an institution that's a little bit further behind the curve in terms of what they're trying to adopt from a digital experience standpoint than UMass is, and they're trying to kind of get up to speed and deliver that more modern experience. Kind of what are the pieces of advice that you would give them? What are the recommendations that you think would be helpful to them?
I think it's really important to do your homework and understand the landscape, the culture. With this major CRM initiative, we got a lot more traction after COVID. And once there are many folks coming together and trying to solve communications problems, rubbing shoulders with people that you wouldn't normally. So that was a big education for me. And I'd already been on campus for a long time at that point. So again, our steering committee, it's all folks who have a really robust experience with the university. It doesn't mean that somebody who's new to an organization couldn't make a change, couldn't make an impact. But I think it's good to know, I think it's particularly in higher ed where it is not always the most nimble, it can be hard to change, that we're working with people who know where the bodies are buried. And, it kind of, I think, helps you build that trust that'll be essential to help people come around to a new reality and that street cred, that when you're trying to make proposals that you really do know what you're talking about. like I said before, I think hiring good partners is important. Some of these technology solutions are vast. I mean, just think about Excel. There's like 5 different ways to do the same thing. So many of these big platforms that we're looking to adopt, we could probably figure it out, but it's probably you need a good guide. And it'd be hard to hire those people who really understand these cutting edge technologies. Find those evangelists, find the folks on campus who are enthusiastic, who do want digital transformation. For us, it was originally the School of Management and Online Education, and we ran through that door, and then others followed. And then, again, I think don't be afraid to talk to other colleagues at other institutions, because even if it's not a direct apples to apples comparison, there's always places for inspiration. And, again, I think that can provide a lot of comfort with academia. They're reaching across the aisle. They're always working with other institutions. But again, to see that, we're not alone, others have challenges and they've solved for them and they've overcome it, it makes it all feel a bit more doable.
That spirit of teamwork and collaboration that is just so important in any organization. I think it's refreshing to hear that that's so prevalent in your organization and in higher ed in general. I think just because that's the kind of environment you would hope it is, right? I mean, it's a place of higher education. You'd hope people are open to ideas, are open to collaborating, are open to learning, and open to saying, how can we do this better? How can we continue to kind of iterate and advance and experiment and just figure out things together in a way, understanding that the whole is greater than some of its parts. That if we work together, we're going to end up with a better result. And I think that's what you've been accomplishing already during your time at UMass and in your leadership there. And it seems like that's what you're going to continue accomplishing. So definitely thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for the insights that you were able to share today. We really appreciate having you on, Chris.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.